Hi everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to needle felt a pumpkin and a leaf. So here is my leaf and here is my pumpkin. So needle felting is just taking a bunch of roving wool and you're going to stab it with a needle many times. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. You can make a garland out of these, you can add these to wreaths. You can put them outside. They may shrink a little bit if they get wet, but that's okay because it's felting. It doesn't really matter. So that's what I'm going to show you. So we're going to start off with the leaf, and this is the equipment that you're going to need. So I'll put those aside. First, we're going to need 2 cookie cutters. We're going to need a pumpkin and a leaf, and then you're going to need needle felting needles. Now these are special needles. They're very sharp. They have little barbs on them. Of course, right now you can't see them, but they have little barbs, and that's what makes the material felt together. This is a needle felting needle with a holder, and this is what your needle felting needle looks like basically. So the needle itself is sort of square with barbs on it. And if you get a needle felting holder like this one, you have to use the brand of needles of the brand of the needle holder. So I bought mine at Hobby Lobby, and that's Yarnology. Okay, and this is the size needle I have to put in my needle holder. Whereas these needles came with another kit that I had, and they just come in a long tube like this, with a cap on it. Okay, so you can use either needle you would like. So we're going to start off with the leaf, and we're going to start off with, this is wool roving, they call it. It's wool that has not been put into yarn, spun into yarn. So we're just going to take a little bit of red, and I used red, yellow, and orange in my leaves. So I'm going to take a little bit of red, little bit of orange. It depends on how much colors you want in each. There's no science of how much you're going to use of each color. So just pull off what you think you're going to need of each color for the size of your cookie cutter. I'm going to take a little bit of orange. I don't want that much. Okay. I'm going to put my pumpkin aside for now. Okay, and I'm going to pull my wool apart. Let's pull it apart. That's the yellow. I'm going to pull my red apart. And then we're going to layer these inside the cookie cutter, depending on what colors you want to be more prominent in your leaf. Pull my orange apart. Okay. Now I've got I'm going to tilt my computer down so you can see what I'm doing in front of me. I have my pad. Always work on a piece of cardboard because you don't want to stab your tabletop and you'll end up with little holes in your tabletop. You also want to use a foam pad, which you can pick these up also at any craft store. And my cookie cutter. As you can see, my pad is well used. I'm probably going to need a new one soon. So you put that down on top of the cardboard, you put your cookie cutter on top of your foam pad, and now we're going to layer in the colors. What I like to do first before I put it in the cookie cutter is I like to put some of my colors down first. I like my red on the inside, overlap those a little bit, put my red down, and then I'm going to put my orange on top, and I'm going to squish it into a ball, and I'm going to squish it down into my cookie cutter. Of course, every leaf will be different. They're never going to ever be the same. And I'm going to push a little bit into the stem, make sure some gets down pushed in there. Now when you hold the cookie cutter, try to hold it in the middle of the cookie cutter, because as you're stabbing it with the needle sometimes comes out the bottom through the foam because you have to go sideways a little bit. And make sure you get some of the roving down into the stem, which will happen as your needle felting. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle and we're just going to continue to stab. Be very careful not to stab your fingers. It does hurt. Stab some down into the stem. Stab it down in there. Make sure all of it gets down into the cookie cutter. And what this needle does, it intertwines the fibers as it's pulling up and down through the the roving, and you just keep stabbing it, go all the way around the edges. Again, make sure your finger's not too far down to the middle, down to the bottom of the cookie cutter, because the needle will come out from underneath. And you're just going to stab all the way around it. And you're just going to keep stabbing. I'm going to use my longer needle because my cookie cutter is so high. Some needles are longer than others. There's different millimeters. I'm not quite sure what they're different for, but some are longer than others, and that might be the length of the needle. You can also get any of this stuff at any craft store, on Amazon, anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to turn this up so you guys can see what it looks like right now. So as you can see, as I started, it was all bunched up over the cookie cutter. Now it's pushed down into it. We're going to stab it a little bit more before we turn it over. And you're going to turn it over several times because you want it to get thinner and look more like felt. So we're just going to keep stabbing it. Now it's going to stick to the foam a little bit because as you're stabbing it, you're stabbing down into the foam. And some of the fibers like to go down into the foam with it. But that's okay, you just wiggle it loose. Stab it sideways a little bit. This is where it can come out from underneath the cookie cutter. So please be careful. I can't caution that more. Please watch your fingers. This needle's very sharp. I've poked myself a few times already. And you're going to stab the whole thing, not just around the edges, even in the middle. You're just going to keep stabbing it. Okay, now I think I'm ready to turn it over. So what I'm going to do is wiggle it a little bit. You can also get your finger under there, lift it off. Try to keep it in the cookie cutter right now because it still needs to keep its shape. And you're going to flip it over. Again, be careful with your cookie cutter. Some cookie cutters have really sharp edges on one side and a rounded edge on the other. So just be careful. Push your leaf down onto the foam and continue to stab. Get around all the edges because you want to make sure all the edges take the same shape as your cookie cutter. This is one of the easier ways to get shapes if you're not very good at freehanding everything. You can use cookie cutters to get any shape that you want if you have them available. Eventually we're going to take it out of the cookie cutter and keep it to the shape, but until it gets a little thinner, it's not really going to keep its shape that much. Okay, so you're just going to keep stabbing it. And then eventually we're going to turn it over again. Okay, so I'm going to stop with this for a minute because you guys, I'm sure, get the idea, but that's what my leaf is starting to look like. I'm going to take this off of here, but I'm going to leave it in the cookie cutter, and I'm going to show you different degrees of thicknesses of my different leaves. Here's one that's like halfway through about where I'm up to now. You can see it's pretty thick. And then I have another leaf that I've gotten a little bit further down the line, and it's a little bit thinner than the first one. And this one's more to the point where I can take it out of the cookie cutter and start stabbing it. And then eventually it gets really, really thin, almost to the thickness of felt. And this is the degree you want it to get to. And it will eventually get there. It just means a bunch of stabbing. So I'm going to get to the middle, the one almost close to that. This is the one where at the point I'd probably take it out of the cookie cutter and I'd start stabbing it. And this is the point where you really need to watch your fingers, that you don't want your fingers in your way. So now at this point you can continue to stab it. You can leave it in the cookie cutter if you want at this point, so you keep the shape, or you can just try and keep free form at this point. You're going to continue to go around all the edges. Again, keep your fingers out of the way. This is more to the point where you want to go a little bit more sideways with your needle. So we're just going all the way around the edging. And this is the point where you can start stabbing the sides, trying to keep the shape of the leaf. This intertwines the fibers a little bit more. It'll also make it a little bit smaller. So you don't have to do this step if you don't want to, but it just gives the edge a little bit more shape. You can also shape it at this point a little bit more. You don't have to if you don't want to. You can keep it in the cookie cutter. Again, watch your fingers. This is the most dangerous part of it, where you're going to stab your fingers more. Stab it sideways. Just keep stabbing it all over. You can flip the block around so you can get to the other side of your leaf. Just shape it. You'll see that the edges seem a little fuzzy, blurry at the time. This is another reason why you might want to take it out of the cookie cutter, to get rid of that fuzziness on the edges. Helps you shape it. Again, keep stabbing. And then you're just going to continue to stab your leaf. And eventually it will get to this point. It'll be nice and thin. Okay, so that's how you do the leaf. We're going to move on to the pumpkin. Okay, so we take the pumpkin cookie cutter again. Move my needles out of my way so I don't stick myself. And I'm going to take more of the orange. I'm going to need a little bit more for the pumpkin. So I'm going to rip off a big hank of orange, I'm sorry. And we're going to pull it apart like we did before. This helps the fibers to adhere to each other. Keep pulling it apart. Okay, so now I got this big blob of orange. Now I wanted yellow for the stem, so I'm going to take a little bit of yellow. There is no science to how much you're going to take. So I just take a little piece like this, pull it apart, and form it into a ball after I've pulled it apart. Now I'm going to stick my orange down into my pumpkin first. Form that in there. Push it down into it. Make sure the pumpkin stays on your mat. Now I'm going to move some orange aside, put my yellow in the stem. You can use a green stem if you'd like, an orange stem. It's up to you, or you can just make the whole thing orange. It's your pumpkin. Okay, now I'm going to start needling it. So I'm going to get my needle out again. And once again, keep your fingers out of the way. And you start stabbing around the edge to get it down in there. Make sure all the fiber goes down into your pumpkin. And you're going to keep stabbing it. When it's not so fluffy, we'll turn it over again and stab it for a while. I feel like a sewing machine. And you just keep stabbing it. Okay, now I think I'm ready to turn it over. I like to move it in the cookie cutter to pull it off the foam. That's all right, just pull it off, flip it over, push it down into the pumpkin again, and continue to stab. Get it down in there again. And just like the leaf, you're just going to continue to stab it. Keep flipping it over. Move the yellow and the orange together. Go a little sideways so they connect and grab each other and get together. Not so much that the yellow and the orange end up mixing. completely. Still want to keep that color separation. If you find you didn't use enough roving as you're working and you find some thin spots, you can take a little bit more, just pull it off, take a little bit, and you can just sit it on top of your spot where you feel it's thin. Just add it in there, lay it on top, and then you just keep needling it, and it actually fills in and you don't even see it. As you can see, I don't even see it anymore. So if you get to the point where you're a little thin, here's a couple pumpkins in different stages. This one's pretty raw. I didn't get too far on it. And then this one's a little bit thicker, so it looks a little bit more shaped. As you can see, the yellow is attaching. It looks a little different on each side. And then it gets to the point of being really thin. You want it like felt. It feels felt. Of course, you can leave it any thickness you want. This one might be a little, this one's really not finished. As you can see, it really is not shaped. This one's a little bit thicker, but if you'd rather leave it this thickness, of course, by all means, that's your project. You can leave it as thick as you want, or you can make it this thin. This one has a little bit of thin spots. I'm not sure you can see it. I probably should have added more felt at the time, but I didn't. So you can make them as thick or as thin as you'd like them. I hope you enjoyed my craft today. Enjoy your needled felting and pumpkins. I will be using my pumpkins and my leaves on a wreath craft that I will be doing in the future. Thank you for watching and have a great day.